You want to start?
As you guys know, speaker today is going to be Duaa Zaheer. Simran's going to do an introduction on her before we start getting into questions about how she got where she is now, how she got there, her portfolio, etc. So without further ado, we're going to introduce you guys to Duaa Zaheer.
So yeah, getting started, a little bit about her. She's pursuing her Bachelor of Interaction Design at Sheridan College, and she's been a UX intern at Pivot Design Group, a product design intern at Microsoft, and a junior designer at Sheridan Student Union. And then there's also a link to her portfolio that we will go over later, and then we'll also be mailing out these slides so you can click through all the links. So starting off, we have some questions we compiled from our Instagram story. We asked you guys to ask us some questions that you want to ask her, as well as some questions that we personally had. So we can just get started with them.
All right, so the first question. So Duaa, how did you start your portfolio, and basically like what got the ball rolling?
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Duaa. So I started my portfolio when I was in my second year. And honestly, the motivation to start it was because while I was in my second year, my school professors went on strike. So for 2.5 months, we just didn't have any classes. So I was like, oh, like free time, might as well work on my portfolio. So my first portfolio was really, really basic, really simple. I don't really remember what it looked like, which is probably a good thing. But it was on Squarespace. I just chose a template, had a couple of projects, built some case studies for them. I think I had like 3 projects on my portfolio, my about page, and then a link to like my resume. And I wanted that because in my program, specifically between 3rd and 4th year, you have to have a mandatory internship. I wanted to get a head start and do an internship between my 2nd and 3rd year. And for that, I needed a portfolio so I could start applying to places. So I made it a goal for myself that by December of my 2nd year, I would have my portfolio done and ready to apply. And then I started applying over Christmas break and in January. Should I talk a little bit about how I got into design as well?
Yeah.
Sure. So I actually didn't know anything about design until I started my post-secondary education. At my high school, art classes were really like basic, like there wasn't any specialty, so I could like focus in design and my art. It was just basic, like fine and visual arts. Originally, I wanted to go into animation because my college is very famous for the animation program. Their graduates end up working at like Disney and Pixar on huge movies. And I thought that's like what I wanted to do because every time I would watch any of my favorite Disney movies, I would feel really happy. And I wanted to express these emotions and have other people feel the same way. And I wanted to like leave that impact on people. So because I didn't have a portfolio to apply to the animation program, my school offered this 1-year program called Art Fundamentals, where it does just courses about basics of art and design. So I took that to build my portfolio. And every class I had to do with animation, like figure drawing, painting, I did not like. And I loved my design class. Like my design class was the only class I really looked forward to every week. So my design professor was like, oh, like you don't want to go into animation. You should check out this design program. So he introduced me to the program I'm currently in. And that's how I got to learn about design and learn how it was kind of like mixing creativity that I always wanted in my career, but also bringing the people aspect with psychology and sociology and mixing these 2 fields together and then adding technology on top. And yeah, it felt like the perfect fit and I never looked back since.
I guess we already answered this question, so we can go to the next one. So what helped you the most when preparing to apply for internships?
So definitely having a head start on my portfolio really helped. I know a couple of my friends didn't start their portfolio until a bit later in the year. And because they were kind of procrastinating on that, they missed out on a lot of like deadlines and early applications for internships. So if we're talking about school year, I would say definitely take the summer to work on your portfolio and have it ready to be able to like apply to places by September. And your portfolio is never going to be done. You're never going to feel like it's finished, but it's better to have something than nothing. It's better to have somewhere where you can point people so they can see your work rather than just talk about your work hypothetically but not have anything to show. So definitely one is having my portfolio ready and ready to apply. The other one would be I really leveraged my connections. And by connections, I mean literally just people in my program that were a couple years older than me and had already done a couple of internships. I asked them to look over my portfolio, to give me some interview advice, look over my resume, and just give me feedback on how I can improve, and if they had any leads for internships. So my very first internship, which was at Pivot Design Agency, which is a small design agency in Toronto, one of my friends who was in fourth year when I was in first year, so when I was in second year, she had already graduated. She had interned there, like that was her first internship, and she still kept in touch with them and just referred me via email. And that's how I got like my foot in the door. So if there's anybody in your close social circle that you feel comfortable reaching out to and asking like if they have any leads for internships, most people in my experience have been really kind and helpful and are willing to help people out, especially help like junior designers and people who are just getting started into design. So get your portfolio ready, have your resume ready, and rely on your connections.
And then, what do you recommend for someone looking to boost their resume?
For sure. I think it's really hard to put together a design resume, especially if you don't have any design experience or job experience in the industry. So what I would recommend doing is going to hackathons or participating in design challenges where you yourself are in a design role, and including that as sort of experience that you have, as well as this like club that you have. I think this could very well count as experience because you are communicating and trying to teach design to a bunch of people, and I think that's super valuable. So look at stuff you've done in the past or stuff you're planning to do in the future and see how you can relate that to your design experience. Things like picking up freelance jobs also counts as experience. So if there's any clients that you're working with or doing some freelance work, you can put that on there as well. Just make sure that when you're talking about these experiences, you're using what people like to call impact language and really highlighting like what you contributed to this project or this team and what your success metrics were. When it comes to like hackathons and stuff, it's hard to measure success metrics because it's like a one-time thing, but a success metric might be that you placed at the hackathon, or even if you didn't do that, it could be like you interviewed X amount of people during your hackathon, or you created X amount of like prototypes, or anything that you can pull together to show the work you did. And obviously keep it scannable, readable. Bullet points are always better than like full sentences or paragraphs. And just get straight to the point of how you impacted whatever team, project, or client you were working for.
So what sources do you use to stay up to date on the latest design trends?
The good thing about this is that there's a bunch of sources out there. I mainly rely on Twitter. So I'm on Twitter a lot. So a lot of people would just post something new that would come up and I would like dig deep on that. One of my friends, I'll link it later, but he created this like big like resource in Webflow, which is just all design resources you can find. Icons, fonts, illustrations, design systems, like anything that's open source and available is kind of like a glossary where you can like find these things. So that's really helpful as well. And then I get most of my design inspiration from Pinterest. So like typography or any color palette, stuff like that, I just like browse on Pinterest and like save stuff to like some boards. So that's like how I stay up to date. As for like actual like iOS guidelines and actual design system trends, I'm still trying to like figure out what design systems is, and I'm still like learning that part of design. But mostly I just like to see what I like visually, so like what's aesthetically pleasing to me, as well as like people doing new stuff in design and things I've never seen before. Those things capture my eye as well. So I think like you can find inspiration and design trends anywhere, especially because there's so many platforms that showcase these things. Like Product Hunt is one of them. They like post a bunch of new apps that are coming along. And then I'll link the design resource sheet that my friend made. I think that's a really good one, especially if you want to have everything in like one spot.
So Dua, you mentioned using your connections as well as impact language to stand out. With all the other talent out there, what other advice would you give to have someone stand out to employers or to internship opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really hard. When I was starting out, I didn't know how to like make myself stand out. I had a hard time like talking about myself as a designer, which is why like about pages on portfolios used to be really hard for me to write, because I felt like I was just like super average. Like I didn't have anything to put that edge to me. But what I did to supplement that is I actually went out and had like different experiences, both in and outside of design. There's a tweet by Mitch Goldstein, who's like a very famous like design educator. I think he teaches at RIT maybe. I'll double check that. Either RIT or RISD, but he has like this series that he does on Twitter called Dear Design Student. And one of them was be more than just a design student. And it's about going out there and experiencing new things that will make you grow as a person, but also as a designer. So for example, hackathons was a thing that helped me grow as a designer, but also allowed me to like meet a bunch of new people. It allowed me to work on my pitching skills. It allowed me to work with developers. And then on the other side, I did improv because my friend ran the improv club at my school. And that just allowed me to be more confident and like let loose a bit and like think on my feet. So although it's not like completely related to design, it helped me grow, and I could like talk about that or drop that during an interview. Another thing I did was, and I have this on my about page, but I used to be chair of this club at my school that would sponsor student refugees from abroad. So although that had nothing to do with design, it was much more like logistical stuff. It was just something I really like to do because I gravitate towards projects that have like this sort of social impact. So I think I talk about that on my website because I hope it shows that these are the types of projects I hope to work on in the future in full time. Like I want to work on projects that directly impact people and are focused on like social good. So it's one thing to just for me to just to say it, but it's another thing for me to prove it by other things I'm doing. So I think to stand out, you have to first like self-reflect a bit and think about like what type of designer you want to be, and then go out there and find activities that will enforce that and that will like make you become that type of designer. And as mentioned, they could be directly related to design and tech, but they don't have to. Like you can just go out there and be like, oh, like I want to try this new hike that's like near my house and it's like a new challenge for me. Go out and do that and like pick up different hobbies so you can talk about that on your portfolio as well. I think people want to see people who are more than just design. They want to see who you are as a person as well.
Yeah, so going off the page of internships, how would you recommend people prepare for design interviews?
Yeah, I think most design interviews, from my experience, are pretty similar. They usually start off with like a phone screening. And if you pass that phone screening, you go on to like the final round. And that could be in person or video chat. So for my Microsoft interview, it started off with, I got reached out through like LinkedIn, then went through a phone screening, which was like 30 minutes, just walking through my portfolio, learning a little bit more about me and my experiences. And then it was in-person interviews, and those varied a lot. I think in-person interviews really depend on who's interviewing you. So some of those interviews were very much a conversation where I was just like bantering and chatting with the person across from me, while other was very much through like walk through the specific project on your portfolio, and it was much more structured and much more Q&A. So I think those interviews just depend on who's interviewing you and what type of mood they're in. Unfortunately, a lot of interviews rely on luck, and they rely on whoever's interviewing you to be in a good mood. They rely on your recruiter to be in a good mood, and those things you can't necessarily control. But I would say know your stuff. So if you're preparing to present your portfolio or a case study, know that inside out, and present it in a way where you're kind of like telling a story and not just reading off your slides. And come prepared with questions. If you know who's going to be interviewing you, do a little bit of research on them and come prepared with some questions you might ask. And just be genuine and don't be nervous. I know it's like hard to not be nervous, but trick I use is I trick myself by saying I'm excited rather than nervous. So whenever someone asks me like, oh, you have this big interview coming up, how do you feel? My automatic response like, oh yeah, I'm super excited. Because then it'll just like trick your brain to like thinking you're actually excited, and then it'll be much more positive. One of my professors told me that your brain reacts the same way to excitement and nervousness. So if you just say you're excited instead, that's just a more positive way to look at it, and you'll feel better as well. So just go in thinking that it's just going to be a conversation, because in reality it is. It's just a conversation where one person just wants to know a little bit more about you. And if you treat it that way, and if you present yourself in the most genuine way as possible, I think that will come across much more than being like super prepared, going by the book. I think it's okay to wing it a little bit. I wing a lot of my interviews because if I'm too by the book, if I veer off a bit, that like throws me off. So it's okay to like wing it a little bit, be excited, but still have some preparation so you're not like completely like flying off by the seat of your pants. But yeah.
All right. So, what are some misconceptions about the design industry that you've found as you gained experience?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think I still have a lot to experience in the design industry. So, as mentioned, I've done 2 internships in the past, Pivot Design Group and Microsoft. And this summer, I'm going to be interning remotely with Facebook. So I think I still have like a lot of experience to gain. But one thing I noticed during my internship at Microsoft is that design definitely looks different at big corporations. And rather than working on like a huge product from beginning to end and shipping that, it's mostly you're going to be working on like small parts of a larger product. And that's like a lot of work as well. So thinking like the small change, like when you update a messenger app or anything like that, these small changes actually could take a lot of time. So that was one misconception I had about my internship, or about the design industry. Another thing is, again, this goes for more bigger corporations, but I'm sure it's the same at like other places as well, but it's very business driven. So a lot of the end goals or success metrics that you're trying to meet is this gonna make the business more money? Which is, as an idealistic designer entering the industry, trying to quote unquote change the world, it's a little hard to like hear that, like, oh, like if they probably won't give this project as much funding if it doesn't like bring in revenue or anything like that. But it's true, like everything, we live in a world of capitalism, everything like relies on money. So it makes sense that like business will value projects more if they bring in money. But there are teams out there that are doing some really cool stuff in like experimental spaces and trying new things and trying to break the design mold. So I think it's just about finding that balance. If you, let's say, are working, your 9-to-5 job it's not as exciting. The work you might be doing, the project you might be working on might seem a little boring to you or just too like business oriented. Pick up some like side projects on the side that make you happy and that like actually like fuel your passion for design. Because I know people can get jaded really quickly. But yeah, I think I still have a lot to learn about the design industry, especially like the design industry in the Bay Area, because I've never been there before. I've only heard things. So I think I want to go and experience it for myself. I was hopefully planning on doing that this summer, but with COVID, that's not going to be possible. But yeah, I think that's like my main 2 misconceptions I had. But I have a lot to learn still.
So you did somewhat touch on this, but more specifically, what are some challenges you faced in the design industry?
Yeah, I think it's not something I've faced directly yet, but I definitely see that I eventually, like, I learned about this about myself recently, but eventually I see myself going into design leadership and design management roles in the future. So I want to like manage teams. I don't want to be an IC or individual contributor forever. What that means is I don't want to be literally designing screens forever. I want to be able to like lead a whole product vision or lead a team and things like that. I like being very people facing. So eventually, a couple years into my job, I want to go into design leadership. But what I noticed is that these tracks are a little more difficult, especially for women of color. So I would like to see more women of color in design leadership positions. Um, Not something I've faced directly myself yet, but I've seen that there's much more men at the table right now, but there are some changes that are being made. So more voices for women of color. Something I'm currently facing or will be facing after my internship is the lack of junior design roles that isn't through an internship track. So if you go through an internship track and you get a return offer, you have a new grad job, easy, like you get started there. But let's say you didn't like your internship or you didn't like that team or you didn't get a return offer, it's really hard to find junior design roles and entry level roles because unfortunately people just don't want to put it, either they don't want to or they don't have the resources to put in the time to mentor like junior designers entering their company. They rather have people with like 3 to 5 years of experience so they don't have to like start from quote unquote ground zero. But I think there's a lot of junior designers, even some who are younger than me, who are doing really, really cool stuff and are insanely talented. And it's kind of like unfortunate to see that we all have like a harder time getting our foot in the door, especially if you don't have like previous experience at said company, like if you don't go through their internship track. So that's something I'd really like to see change, more mentorship and more resources in hiring junior designers.
All right, so switching gears towards more of like the project aspect of design, how do you approach or how do you like to approach design projects?
This is a good question. I think I didn't really like hone in on my process until like this year because a lot of my projects in my first 3 years of my program were either group projects or they're very like set into like you have to like do it this way, and like by this day like our first deliverables are like wireframes, and by this day you have to have this done. In my fourth year I got to work on my thesis project, and that really allowed me to become a much more independent designer, where I got to determine my process for myself. My thesis advisor was like, this is the end due date, these are the deliverables that is required, you get there however you want to like get there. So that kind of like encouraged me to like think about what my design process is like. Typically if I were to like list it very like quickly and like simplify it, I like to start off with research. I like to spend a lot of time defining the problem space and discovering about the problem space. I typically start off by just listing what I don't know about the project or any assumptions I have about my problem space. And then I go about solving those questions or validating those assumptions through user interviews, secondary research, through the use of design principles, anything that I can find. I like validate like, okay, this is an actual problem and these are the pain points. So once that's done, I take those pain points and be like, okay, how can I like turn these pain points into like features that will be able to like solve them? So here I start like user journey mapping. I kind of get into the shoes of who I'm designing for and things like that. A lot of that is like UX stuff, personas, user journeys, archetypes, and then like feature lists. So once I have like, okay, now I know what the solution is going to look like, then I start into actual designing with sketches. I like to sketch out my wireframes first. I have a really hard time just jumping straight into Figma or Sketch to start designing. I think it's very scary to have like just a blank artboard and not know where to start. So rough sketches where I could just like draw rectangles and get the layout really helped me. Then I translate those like low fidelity to high fidelity. Then from there on, it's just like user testing and like back and forth until I feel like I'm comfortable with the product, or until like the deadline hits. So once the deadline hits, I typically, my program requires us to do like a process document. So I put everything, like all my process I've done, into one document and then present that to the class. But usually that's how I work. Starting off with research, then like validating my assumptions and unknowns, working through the pain points, turning those pain points into features that like directly relate to them, and then starting out with designing like the actual UI and visual design.
Sorry, I was muted. Are you currently working on any projects?
Yeah, so I recently, I know like a lot of people through their university years jumped on like side projects a lot. And other than a couple of hackathons I did while I was in school, I never picked up side projects because I was just too focused on school itself. But recently, because it was my last year, I had a lighter course load, and I just felt much more confident in my design skills than I did back when I was in second and third year. I felt like, okay, like maybe I could like work on some stuff on the side. So back in the fall, I jumped on a project with a couple of people like I met on Twitter. They were already working on it like through the summer, but I asked them if I could be like their designer. Essentially, we're just working on this like tool that is, they describe it as Glassdoor for interns, but essentially it'll just like showcase different companies that offer internships and then like list their perks and benefits, so you can easily compare between an internship at Facebook versus an internship at Google and things like that. It's kind of halted because of like work from home and stuff like that, so it's not like an active project we're working on. I haven't touched it in a while, and I don't think the devs have actually started building much, but it's something that we're like slowly picking away at. And then I'm hopping on like small projects, like I'm holding one-on-one office hour interviews with people. It's not really a project, it's more like an initiative I like to do, but I learn from that a lot too. Learning from what other people are doing and how I can help them. And I end up learning a lot from them as well. And then I'm working on recently putting together a zine or a zine in Figma. And I'm trying to explore all the cool stuff you can do with Figma. So yeah, those are some stuff I'm working on.
Right. And finally, do you have a mentor or multiple mentors? And if so, how did you meet them and what makes them a good mentor?
For sure. I think having a mentor is extremely important. But there's also this like connotation that comes with the word mentor or mentorship, to think that it's such like a formal process, which is why for the longest time, I was very scared of mentorship. I didn't want to mentor people because I thought I didn't know enough to like teach them. And I didn't want to have a mentor, or I was scared to have a mentor because I felt like I didn't know what to ask, or I would like ask stupid questions, like waste their time and things like that. But as I like met more people through Twitter mainly, I think Twitter has been a really good tool for me to like meet a bunch of people. I realized that mentorship is truly very much more informal than we make it out to be. So it's never really like going up to someone and be like, can you be my mentor? Like that doesn't happen. It's more so finding someone whose work you admire and then being like, I really like this work of yours. Can I chat with you to like learn more about you? And it's very simple like that. And I think most of my mentors happen that way, where I would be looking for feedback in my portfolio, be like, hey, like, I really respect you as a designer. I'm looking for feedback. Could you possibly, if you have time, give me some? And it's just about like starting that conversation. And then I consider them like almost friends now. Like mentorship, it doesn't have to be this whole formal thing with like power dynamics. Like truly like people who are really nice and good mentors treat your conversations as conversations and see you as an equal. They don't see you as someone, well, they obviously like see you as someone who has a lot more to learn, but they're willing to like share that information with you and help you and guide you through that. So I think if you want to meet a mentor, is just find someone whose work you admire, and who you want to learn from, and just ask them meaningful questions, not just like, oh, well, it's okay to ask like, how did you get into design? Like those are opening questions, but have some thing that you want to take away from it. Do you want to learn more about design leadership, or do you want to improve your storytelling skills on your portfolio and this person does that? Or are they working in a field where you see yourself in the future, like healthcare, fintech, AR, VR? Are they doing stuff that you want to like learn more about, and build those connections that way? And I think it's much more meaningful that way, and just much more like easier and like less intimidating than officially asking someone to be your mentor, because I think mentorship is like a two-way thing and it's never consistent. Not everyone's mentor is not going to be like the same. So it's about just finding people who you like vibe with, essentially.
Well, awesome, Duaa. Thanks for answering all those questions. Before we jump into that, we're going to be having a little, we're jumping into the questions. We're going to ask you to walk through your portfolio and just kind of briefly go over some of the projects you've been doing. We're not expecting you to go in like super in detail, but just for those who maybe want to seem someone who's has some design industry experience, I think it'd be great for them to see your portfolio. So feel free to take us through how you decided which projects to include, the thought process behind the projects, and anything that you learned from these experiences.
For sure. So I actually built my portfolio in Webflow, and I did a redesign of this in July of 2019. So while I was at my Microsoft internship, my old portfolio, the one I applied to Microsoft with, was on Squarespace, and it was super basic. So I wanted to like elevate it a little bit. So I turned to Webflow because it just gave me a little bit more creative freedom to like do the stuff I wanted to do. So I start off with just a basic like introduction about myself. I think here is a good way to talk about what you like about design or what you're passionate about design. This is also another way to make you stand out. There's a couple basic phrases that people like to throw out, and I've definitely been guilty of them, like designer at the intersection of like art and technology. But like, what does that really mean, honestly? It's mostly like, just be honest about like what you like and what you're passionate about, and then that'll be like much more clearer. And I talk about that in my about page as well. I describe a little bit about like what I'm all about, talk about some of my extracurriculars, like leading a club for student refugees or building a community for designers of color. And then like, I don't know, it's kind of an Easter egg, but if you scroll up and like hover over the emojis, I kind of like list out like my favorite restaurants and like what I'm reading, what I'm watching on Netflix and things like that. It's a bit of an Easter egg. Not everyone notices, but I like it as a small little touch.
No, that's a good touch, yeah.
And then I always have like a call to action at the bottom. So if people do want to reach out to me, I try to give them a bit of a like opener that they can use. So I think that's important as well. And then I also use my about page as kind of like a mini resume. So this is much more condensed than my actual resume. So I just put in my experiences and then some basic skills at the bottom, just in case they don't actually get to click on my resume, they can see it here as well.
Nice touch, yeah, for sure. I also noticed that you added in a few little personality quirks here and there, something like Disney movies and like cuisine. So would you recommend people add in a little bit of personality into their portfolios?
Yes, definitely. I think adding personality is super important. It'll make you stand out. People might remember that thing from your portfolio and like bring it up during conversations. So definitely have those things that if they don't bring it up, you can bring it up, and it's kind of like in your toolbox. So definitely show personality, show what you're interested in, any hobbies you have outside of design.
Awesome. Real quick, if we go to your work, it if you could just showcase one project to the rest of this group, which one would that be?
I could do
And why?
I could do the Headspace one because it's a little like shorter and more like concise, and you can understand it a little bit better. But essentially, this was for a project at school. We had to choose an existing app, do a brand analysis for it, and see how micro interactions can be used to enhance the experience. So I used the Headspace app because
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But for people who don't know what micro interactions are, do you think you could explain that?
Yeah, for sure. So micro interactions are essentially like small little animations that you see on apps that you might not notice immediately, but they kind of like draw your eye to different parts of the experience, and they also create like a delightful experience. For example, on like Facebook, if you click the notification bell icon, sometimes it like shakes to like show there's a new notification there. So like small things that don't necessarily disrupt the experience, but they're there to like add little touches. So those are like what micro interactions are. So this project was fairly simple. I had to create 3 different micro interactions for the Headspace app. I didn't do a lot of designing. Like these are just screenshots that I took from literally the Headspace app, but I did the animations and stuff. And the purpose of this project was to stay aligned to Headspace's brand vision and the brand statement. So if you scroll down a bit, I'll talk a little bit about this case study. I always like to start with like a too long didn't read. So if nobody goes like through past this section, they already know enough about the project and they can already see the end product on the side here. So I try to do this for all my projects, kind of like a project statement at the beginning and then like whatever I ended up building on the side in case they don't scroll past like further. Then I go into my role. So what I did, my team, so this was a solo project. If I worked with collaborators, I would list them here. Any tools I used and the timeline. It's always important to describe your project constraints. So if a hiring manager or a recruiter is looking at your portfolio, they kind of have context as to like what were the constraints set and how did you work under these constraints. Then I just go directly into how am I read like the problem statement. And then because this was a project about brand story and brand analysis, I do a quick little introduction as to like what Headspace's brand story is. I try to keep my paragraph very short, very minimal, quick sentences, and if anything can be turned into a bullet point, I try to do that as well. I don't think I did that in this case study, but I would definitely recommend to use bullet points just because they're really scannable. Then I talk a little bit about why I chose Headspace in particular. Design rationale is really important when it comes to your portfolio. So the recruiters and hiring managers don't just want to see that you're able to do it. They want to know why you made those decisions. So actually being able to back up your design decisions with clear rationale is also super important as well.
Awesome.
Then I try to like bring in some visual elements. So these are some visual elements from Headspace's brand guidelines. And then I start jumping into analyzing the app itself. So I try to use headings to really describe what this paragraph is going to be about. So at first analysis, I found that the app was quite still, like there was actually very little micro interactions I found in the app. So I showcase where I found that. So in this particular paragraph, I think I talk about the loading screen animation. And then I talk about when you actually start using the app and participate in a session, the play button, how it like loads and expands and contracts. So this was one of the few motion graphics that I actually found in the app. So I point that out. And then lastly, I talk about after you're done the session, it shows you like your progress and rewards. But again, there's little to no motion involved. And I talk about how this might make the user feel and what kind of emotions that's bringing out. So now that I've identified the quote unquote problems with the app or I've analyzed the app, I actually jump into my solution. So these are some storyboards I did. So I just like, I don't discuss them much in detail because they're pretty self-explanatory. So I just post them as images. Anything that you can show visually rather than telling is really good and crucial. And it's something I struggle with a lot. I tend to rely much more on words than images. And I tend to like over-explain sometimes. Something I'm trying to like work on, but a tip is if you can rely more on visuals to show your process, that's incredibly important. And then lastly, in the same order, when I listed the problems, I start to list how I tackled each problem and turned it into a solution. And I include the actual like final product on the side there. So I think I go through like each section, explain like what was, how I tackled that problem and like what I made now. So I do it for the loading screen as well as the other screens as well. This made sense for me to use a GIF because it was an animation project, but for all your other projects, if you're able to use GIFs or videos and they actually like walk through the screens you want to show or something, I think that's super valuable because it's much more engaging than just a still image. I know for my other project, I have a still image because I wasn't able to like import GIFs properly, and honestly, I haven't touched that project in a while. But if I were to go back and change it, I would definitely screen record and like make GIFs and videos just because it's just so much easier for people to like understand and follow. So yeah, and then after like I describe my solution, I think the last part is a self-reflection. Reflections are super important in my opinion because it shows how you were able to grow through this project, what you learned. And this is a great section to talk about what you would do differently. So if you didn't have enough time or something went wrong, if there's anything that you were like, okay, in the future, I would tackle it this way. Just because it shows your recruiter, like everyone knows like things happen. You might not have enough time to like, complete a project perfectly, but if you're able to be self-aware of that fact and like share what you would do in the future, I think that's really important as well. But yeah, that's like one of my projects. Do you guys have any questions?
That's awesome. Yeah, does anyone have any questions right now about this specific project or just in the portfolio in general? Okay. So we got one question from Tira. It says, how do you prototype like a project like this?
So this one I did in After Effects just because that was what my professor told us to use. But honestly, there's much more like better prototyping tools out there, like Principle, Origami is another one. Just find whatever works best for you and use that tool. I'm a type of person where I'm truly not like ride or die for any tool. I will use whatever I feel like works best for me, and I can easily, if it allows me, if it's compatible, I can switch between like tools. So honestly, like whatever works best for you. It doesn't matter if it's like not like cult favorite. Do you?
Awesome. We also have one more question. They ask, do you look at the analytics of your portfolio, as in check for who is or how many people check your page out? And if so, what ways does this information help?
Yeah, I definitely have Google Analytics embedded, so I definitely look at them. I mostly like looking at where people are looking at my portfolios, like the geography feature, just because I find it cool. I think it's helpful in ways to, let's say, you can see which page you're clicking on the most, and then my most clicked page is obviously the home page, and the second one is the about page. So if you see a lot of people are clicking on certain pages, you can focus your attention on improving those pages. I think that's a way that could help. And just in general, I think you could do a lot with that data. I haven't explored much of it, but I think there's a lot of like creative things you can do with that data. So just like playing around, see how it helps you. Another one could be they show how many people are viewing your stuff on desktop versus tablet versus mobile. So if you're having a really hard time putting together the mobile version of your portfolio, but you see like only a small percentage of people are viewing on mobile, you can probably put that to the side and be like, okay, I could deprioritize this. So I think for me, it helps me with prioritizing what I need to work on when improving my portfolio.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Making data-driven decisions is really important in the design industry. That's a good point mentioned. We got another question. How did you get data for your research, and what was that process when looking at case studies?
For sure, that's a good question. So I didn't do much research for the Headspace one because that was just like a product analysis. So I just took it upon myself to like use the Headspace app and like analyze it by myself. But other projects, I usually turn to the internet for data. So some data is already out there, like secondary research and stuff like you can find easily out there. Other data, you have to like talk to people about it. So surveys is a good one, like Google Forms or any other survey platform you could do. You could talk to people in your immediate circle. If they're your target user group, you can talk to people in your immediate circle. I relied on Twitter a lot too. When I was working on my thesis, I was working on a project for people of color and mental health. And a lot of people I followed on Twitter were people of color and they had experience with mental health and therapy. So I just would pop like a question like, hey, I'm looking to learn more about this topic. This is one question. And people would just tweet or DM me and I would collect data that way. So whatever works best for you. I don't think it always has to be like sit down one-on-one interviews. I think one-on-one interviews help a lot more when you're actually doing testing on your product and user testing on your product. But you can get data really easily through like virtual conversations as well. And yeah, I did build this using Webflow.
Okay. A question that I don't know if you addressed or not, or you touched on this, but how long did it take you to kind of redesign or start over from your portfolio? Because I know portfolios can take a while to curate, especially if you don't have much experience making one. So maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, I think for me, like I have a different process when it comes to portfolio. I design directly in Webflow just because I feel like it allowed me to just the Webflow is really good at letting you just play around and stuff like that. And it doesn't, and you can easily undo stuff. And if you use it like properly, the workflow is pretty easy. But I know a lot of people actually design in like Figma or Sketch, like they make the design, they get all the dimensions right, and then they import those things into Webflow or whatever platform they're using. I just like go into Webflow and guess, like play around, like increase padding here, decrease it here, play with this font and things like that. I think it took me a couple of weeks. Like I think I spent most of July working on it, just because I had time after school. And it wasn't, okay, to be honest, it took me like a weekend to just get the form of it. Like the basic form, like, okay, I want columns like this and this. And the rest of July, I would just like go in, make minor changes here. I wanted to like add rounded corners to my picture instead of like regular corners, like small little nitpicky stuff. I would just go in and like occasionally do that. But I had already had an idea what I wanted my portfolio to look like. I had already set up like a bunch of like inspiration boards and things like that. So I can like know what fonts and what colors and things I wanted to use. The thing that took the most time was the actual writing of the case study and those materials. I think that takes the most time. So as an answer, I actually don't know how long it took me. I don't think it took me that much time, but the part that took the most time was the writing.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. That's a lot of writing. We have another question. How important are side projects and portfolios? In this person's case, they're working on an app that doesn't really have a big user base at all. So how would you address something like that?
Yeah, I think side projects are really cool. And you should definitely include them on your portfolio. Like even, I think all my projects I have right now, none of them are actually like built or anything. So they're just like prototypes and people aren't using them. I think it's more about thinking about how people might use this and having hypothetical success metrics or how you would measure success hypothetically. Because clearly, like right now, this is like not built with code or anything. Like no one can actually like use this, right? So side projects are really cool to have. I think they show that you do like work outside of your schoolwork as well. So I definitely encourage having side projects. Let me read the question again. And how to present it. I would present it like any other project, honestly. I think there's not, I could talk a little bit about the framework I use when I write my case studies. It's something I learned in school, but it's called the why, how, what framework. And just like Cliff's notes on that, start off by talking about why this project or this problem space you're working on is important, and why should I, as a person viewing your portfolio, care about it. You could do that in many different ways. You could do that by presenting this challenge and presenting why this challenge impacts X amount of people in this user group, and that's why it's important, or anything like that. And then, so once you've established like why it's important, you got me hooked, you relate the challenge, then talk about how you went about solving it. So I do that a little bit over here. I talk about the types of questions I wanted to ask my users. What were some things that I didn't know about the project? What were some of my unknowns? And I just list them off in bullet points. So, and then, so that's like the first part of your research. The second part is like, okay, now that you've listed out what you want to find out, just briefly talk about how you went about finding those things out. So what were your methods? That could be user interviews, surveys, etc. That could just literally be just one sentence. Like, I did a user interviews with X amount of people. And then jump straight into what were your key insights and findings, and how did you relate those key insights and findings to your final like product and solution. And this is the what section. So why is this problem important? How did I go about solving this problem? What is the final solution? And always connect your final solution back to the key insights that you found in your research. So that's like the meat of it. The buns on either side is the too long didn't read project statement at the beginning, as well as your roles and project constraints. And at the end, reflection.
Awesome. And then we have another question. Did you ever find yourself experiencing creative blocks while designing? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I definitely experienced those a lot. I experienced imposter syndrome a lot too. So it's something I'm still learning to deal with. And honestly, I don't think I have an answer of like how to overcome it. It's just like, it's something that comes and goes. But I think I kind of like psych myself and talk to myself, because imposter syndrome is basically your brain tricking yourself into thinking you're not good enough. So I just like trick it back into thinking that I'm good enough. It's just a constant battle between me and my brain. Talking to people really helps. So I reach out to peers and mentors and just like vent about what I'm feeling. And they kind of bring me back down to earth and be like, no, like obviously you could do this because the proof is right here. Sometimes you just need people to point out the obvious, right?
Yeah.
So turn to your support group, talk to people, and it's going to be really hard to actually create when you're in a creative block. So try to find inspiration and try to get yourself excited about whatever you're working on. And maybe just take a step back from that project and focus your energy elsewhere until you feel like you're good to come back to that project again. It's considering it's not like time sensitive or anything.
Right. So going back to some previous questions that were mentioned, how important is it to have a design degree compared to having something like a cognitive science or psych degree, or just really any other non-design related academic degree?
Yeah, I think the relevancy of degrees in the industry is getting like lower and lower. I don't think people actually care. Like in my experience, people don't actually like care if your degree is in cognitive science or in interaction design or something. It definitely helps if you come from a reputable school or a reputable program, which kind of sucks. I feel like that's kind of elitist, but if let's say a company has hired Santa Cruz students before, they might just turn and go recruit there again because they feel comfortable, they know they produce good talent, things like that. So that definitely happens. But I think more so than anything, it's your portfolio that gets you in the door. It's your actual work. and your experience on your resume that is much more valuable than which school you go to, or like what type of good degree you're studying. Because a lot of people that I'm going to be interning with at Facebook and who are design interns also come from like a cognitive science and things like those types of backgrounds. So I think that's very common in the design industry. It's just being able to, but even if you don't have like a college or university degree, if you are a self-starter or you did it through like a boot camp or something, I think it's just definitely about being able to showcase your work through your portfolio. That's most important.
Awesome. Moving on to the next question. So having experience in the field of UX design and research in the industry, what is the process of working with the UI designers if they were separate roles in the company?
Yeah, so in my experience, I've always been the one that does both UX and UI. And I think in most cases, that's where the industry is going. I think some cases that it might not be like that might be more in the agency vibe. I think agencies have set visual designers and they have set like UX and interaction designers. But I think overall you end up touching all these points of the design experience. So I think now, especially in tech and especially in product design, you're expected to do both UX and UI. It's kind of like a package. So personally, I have an experience working with another UI designer because I've been doing that as the designer.
So are UX UI designers very interchangeable in terms of their roles at companies?
Yeah, I think so. I think most companies, especially when you see a position that says product designer, you can expect to be doing all design. You can expect to be doing the UX as well as the visual design and the UI design.
Gotcha. Awesome. Going back to the mentorship question, someone asked what you think is the best way to contact potential mentors, social media, LinkedIn. Obviously, you had your close connections, but for those who don't really have any connections in that design industry, maybe you could touch on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're just starting off in mentorship and you find it a bit intimidating, reaching out to other young designers and junior designers might be a good like first step just to get you comfortable in asking the quote unquote right questions and get you comfortable like talking. So Cofolios, and I'll put the link in the chat. Cofolios has this initiative called Office Hours where different students or new grads offer their time to like talk to other students who are interested in design. And it's just like quick one-on-ones. You can book time with them. And I think that's a really great way just to get your foot in the door and like start talking to people. And they can probably recommend you other people to like talk to as well within their connections. So that's one way. Another way, or what I like to do, is Twitter really helps me. I follow a bunch of designers on Twitter, and how I started having those conversations with them is I would just engage with the content that they were putting out. If they tweeted something like an interesting take on design or an interesting article, I would just tweet back at them. Or if I was looking for like portfolio feedback, I would ask them like, are you willing to like provide me with some? So always go in there with like some sort of ask, and then you can start building those questions, that relationship from there. But I would recommend, just because I did this too, to start off with talking to like junior designers and students, just because it makes it much more easier for you to get comfortable asking those questions. And then once you're comfortable, you can start reaching out to like senior designers and stuff like that.
Awesome. I'm kind of relating to that. Do you talk to your mentors like through social media, online, or do you like grab a coffee with them? Obviously not now, but have you done that in the past?
Yeah, so when I was at Microsoft, we were encouraged to like have one-on-ones. So there I would talk to them like in person as much as I could. But mostly I keep the relationship like going like online. It's not like talking every day, but like if I find something that I think is interesting or if I want their opinion on something, I would just like message them. But sometimes, like, if I'm going through something where I just really need to talk to someone, I could just be like, hey, do you mind jumping in on a quick call for 30 minutes if you have the time at some point this week? And sometimes we would jump in on like calls as well. So I think now more than ever, a lot of people are actually opening up like tweeting out Calendly links for people to just grab spots on their calendar to chat. So definitely take advantage of those situations and like grab a spot, because I think honestly people are bored and they're like trying to like maintain like human connections, so they're willing to like spend some time to talk to junior designers and people who are just starting out, which is really good. So definitely take advantage of that.
Awesome, cool. Someone also asked mentioned that you heard things in the design community in the Bay, and they were wondering what you have heard about the Bay Area and the design here.
I haven't heard much about the design community itself. I just know like a lot of my friends that I've made through Twitter have either interned there or are currently there. So I was hoping to like meet them this summer and like hang out, but unfortunately can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I think it was just more so of the whole concept of Silicon Valley being like very much a tech bubble. It's the main thing I've heard. And I don't think it's false. Like I could definitely see it being that way, but I really just need to be able to experience that in person to see how I react to that environment. Because I know a lot of people are very like all tech all the time or all design all the time. I am not like that, or try not to be like that. I like to have like my design life and then like my own fun life. So work-life balance is super important to me. So I was just curious as to like what that area is like, just geographically, because I've never been there, but also what the community there is like. So I've heard most people who are down there I like really like, and they're great people. I think it's just like I want to experience the environment for myself.
Okay, awesome. And then I think one of our last questions is, do you suggest boot camps over like a master's program or not just school after college?
Honestly, like it's totally up to you. If you feel like you learn better in a classroom setting and you need like guidance from teachers to help you learn and to help you like work on projects, that's something I need. That's how I learn best. Like classroom settings really help me. Then I would suggest like taking a UX course or like a boot camp if that's how you learn best. But if you're completely comfortable doing like self-starting, learning independently through YouTube videos or online courses, then do that instead. It's really just about what you feel like will help you learn the best. I don't think there's like a wrong or right answer. Just make sure to do your research before you like enter these boot camps or courses. If other people have taken them, you can ask them what to expect and things like that, because boot camps can be quite expensive at times, so you want to make sure you're getting your money's worth. So definitely do your research before investing, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add to that is a lot of people in the industry are saying boot camps are just pumping out cookie cutter UXers, which is kind of hard to stand out, and also is expensive. So I guess just be wary of that. That's just something that I've heard in the design community as well.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I honestly I honestly think that UX is a very teachable skill, and I think anybody can learn it. I don't think it's a special superpower that we have. Like, I think anybody that wants to learn UX and has the curiosity for it and has empathy and really cares for people, I think those are the two things you need. If you have those two things, you can pick up UX like easy. Stuff like visual design and UI design, there are like set design principles and guidelines that have been set like for like years ago about like color theory and all these things that you need to like spend a little bit more time learning. But you can learn that as well. Like you might need to have a bit of an eye for the aesthetics, but I think you can build up those skills. But UX is like super easy. I think anybody can learn UX. So if it's something that's interesting to you, like go for it. Don't let anybody else define like how you choose to learn. I think at the end of the day, it's like what type of projects are you like pumping out, or what are you showcasing to people that matters more.
Amen, Dua. Amen. Well, if no one else has any more last minute questions, that's going to wrap up our speaker event for Dua. So Dua, thank you again so much for coming and answering all those questions. I know it went on a little longer past 2, but we still really appreciate your time, and hopefully everyone here gained a little bit more insight. So if for anyone who wants to follow up with you, would it be okay, and where can they find you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. And no worries about like going a little bit over time. I have my LinkedIn as well as my Twitter account linked on my portfolio, so you can like click those. I'm not that active on LinkedIn, but if you message me, I'll try to get there. Sometimes I like don't check it as often. Twitter I'm more active on, and like literally I have my DMs on, so just DM me if you want to chat. And then on Cofolios, I do have a couple of office hours slot opened up for the month of May. So if you want to have a more one-on-one chat, I'd be happy to do that too. If those get filled up and you still want to have a one-on-one chat, just email me and we can try to figure something out. I'm pretty like bored and free these days, so like I have like time. So yeah, but reach out whenever. I like talking to people. So
okay, awesome.
Just a quick thing. The thing that you talked about that one of your friends did with the whole design systems, fonts, typography, and all those open sources, is there a possible chance we can get the link for that?
Yes, I will pull that up right now.
Thank you.
And for anyone here, for anyone here who wants any of the links Dua mentioned, we'll email them out with the slides later today. So you'll get all the links in case you're like trying to go through the chat and get them. We'll send them all out to you, so don't worry.
And we're going to be posting this speaker event online within the near future. So if everyone wants to just look back on it, you'll get the chance to.
Yeah, and definitely send me the link as well when you post it online. I'd love to like look at it if it's available to the public.
Yeah, of course. We'll probably post it on our YouTube channel, so it'll be available.
Yeah.
So yeah,
okay,
that's
awesome.
the link.
So, go ahead.
That's the link. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that's it, guys. So thank you again so much for coming, and thank you, Dua, for your time. We'll see you guys at our next speaker event, which is May 14th. So hope to see everyone there.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for coming.